Hey guys, this is Sarah and Matt from Amateur Filmies, and welcome to a brand new video.
In today's video, we'll be going through some of our Criterion pickups that we got during the Zavvi UK sale, and we hope you enjoy. So the month of July has just passed, and as a lot of you collectors already know, that was the Barnes & Noble Criterion Collection sale month, and we did end up picking up quite a few titles during that sale, but this video is actually about the stuff that we got just before the month of July during the Criterion sale that Zavvi hosted, and they're from the UK, so all the ones we're about to show here, we've got about 10 total. They're all actually Criterion releases from the UK, but obviously they're also part of the US catalogue too, so yeah, we'll get stuck right into it. So the first one we have here is Kahachi Okamoto's Sword of Doom. So I was really interested in picking this film up for quite a few reasons. The first one being is that it is a samurai film, but two, it's actually a samurai film that's not directed by Akira Kurosawa, who, obviously I love his films, but I've been trying to watch more samurai films from other directors, and this one was supposed to be one that was really good, and I have to say I did really enjoy it. Interestingly, it does actually star Toshiro Mifune as well, who's in heaps of Kurosawa films, as well as Tatsuya Nakadai. It's really hard for me to say all these names. Tatsuya Nakadai, who plays the lead in this one, and he was also the lead actor in Harakiri, which I thought was brilliant as well. Another one of the really big selling points for me was the fact that the film takes place from the perspective of a samurai who's sort of gone rogue. He's like known as a sociopathic samurai, and he just leaves like a trail of bodies in his wake, and he's gone like off the rails as far as committing crimes. And that's really like interesting deviation from a lot of the samurai films I've watched, where usually, you know, the lead samurai is someone who's really like wholehearted and, you know, really honorable, or even like an anti-hero, whereas this one sort of feels like it's gone in like the complete opposite direction, where we're seeing, you know, a different type of samurai character, which I thought was really fresh for like my own personal viewing experience. I have to say, out of all the samurai films that I've watched, this one's definitely the bloodiest. You know, you expect to see some action in, you know, samurai films, obviously, but this one is definitely the most violent one that I've seen. And I really liked the cinematography and certain directing choices as well. Like, there's a lot of sort of visual cues that they made use of to sort of really sell the fact that he's a sociopath. Like, for example, one thing that I noticed is that whenever he's dueling someone, he's never sweating, even though he's under intense pressure, whereas his opponent might be sweating. The character is evil, and he does a lot of evil stuff, but I thought it was really interesting to sort of learn more about his motivations through like the dialogue scenes that were peppered throughout the film. If you haven't seen this movie and you are into samurai films in general, I would highly recommend this one. It's a very violent, action-packed one, but it's also a sort of fresh take on the samurai genre as far as, you know, what perspective we're viewing the film from. Again, maybe there are a lot of other films like this, but from my own personal viewing experience, this one feels like a very cool, different take on the main character.
Next up we have a Paul Thomas Anderson film, and that is Punch Drunk Love. And this is my first Paul Thomas Anderson film, and I thought, what a perfect one to start off with, one starring Adam Sandler, like a good gateway one. But I thought this film was extremely unique. I remember the first half an hour, we had recently watched Uncut Gems, and the first half an hour of this movie was really reminiscent of Uncut Gems, or rather, Uncut Gems would be reminiscent of that.
Yeah.
In that there was this sort of chaotic music playing, and there was a lot of action, there was a lot of long takes following Adam Sandler's character around while he did sort of seemingly meaningless tasks. The thing I love about this film is that it's not very plot heavy. It's more about Adam Sandler's character and sort of how he navigates his everyday life and how he navigates love as well. He has a mental illness. I think he has like really severe anxiety, and he has a really like hard time connecting to other people in his family. And he finally finds someone that he sort of connects to, and it's not too schmaltzy of like a love story. Like it feels very real, but I really do highly recommend this film. It is really good.
So this next one was actually the last one that we watched, because this is actually the first time I think we've ever shown a haul and we've actually watched all of them in advance of the video. So we actually got through them all, and this was the last one that we watched, or I watched rather. This is Badlands, directed by Terrence Malick and starring Martin Sheen and Sissy Spacek. And this one was a really, really great film. I think this actually might be the first Terrence Malick film that I've ever watched. I've been really wanting to see The Thin Red Line for such a long time, especially like knowing how big of a cast he has in his films. Like, there's a lot of famous faces in The Thin Red Line. But speaking of Badlands, I'm pretty sure this was his first feature. I could be like wrong with that. But yeah, if it was, this is a really great effort, because yeah, the performances in this, the writing's really good. He has there's a really unusual narration style that he used in this, where Sissy Spacek's character, she would sort of like she would narrate over specific scenes and sort of as the plot progressed, she would give her personal insights of what she was thinking at the time. And it was a sort of interesting way of how to sort of tie the story together. Narration can be sort of hit and miss. You sort of have to do it right. And I think they did do it quite well in this movie. But I do really recommend... I mean, we're going to say this pretty much all of these movies because we loved all of them. But do highly recommend Badlands. Cinematography is great. I really liked the different sets, the locations that they were shooting at. Really beautiful imagery, and as I keep saying, like, the performance in this was stellar as well. So really glad to have finally watched Badlands by Terrence Malick, and as I said, can't wait to check out his other films as well.
We were really excited for this one, and that is Tampopo. We knew this was a famous food-based film, and we couldn't wait to watch it, and it definitely did not disappoint. It has a main plot where two truck drivers try and help this widow revitalize her ramen shop, and they go around and they sort of try to find the perfect ramen recipe to, bring back her business and revitalize, her own personal life as well. But it's also interwoven with a bunch of like sort of side stories and side characters, and all these side stories sort of obviously revolve around food and, especially like Japanese food. And yeah, I thought it was really interesting. I wasn't expecting it, and some of the side stories were surprisingly dark. Yeah, you weren't expecting that either, were you?
No, well, I really liked how there was the underlying plot of them trying to help revitalize the noodle shop, but the fact that it was sort of intercut with the different vignettes of different characters, I thought that sort of spiced the film up and gave a sort of different take on the idea of food and how important it is in people's lives, and like what it can mean in different people's lives as well. There were some things that sort of took me out of the movie a little bit in those vignettes. Like, I was really interested in the main story that was going on with the ramen shop, and while I did like, sort of when it would deviate from that and show some of the side stories, I don't think they were all as good as each other, if that makes sense. There were definitely some that worked better than others, but overall, an interesting take on how to tell a story as far as that narrative, that narrative style. I thought it was really cool, and yeah, really glad to have finally watched this one because it was one that we'd heard about for such a long time, so really good that we were able to get it. This next film is The Fisher King, directed by one of my favourite directors, Terry Gilliam. This is a movie where I definitely won't really go into any details relating to the plot just because I think it is really unique and it sort of does spoil it just a little bit. But I have to say, like, a really interesting type of story for Terry Gilliam to tell. While I did like his take on the film, the story is that unique in that in this like particular way that I would have been really interested to see how a different director would approach it as well. The film tackles moral ambiguity really well, and I think like the main issue that drives the plot was executed in a really sort of convincing way, and it makes for a really interesting point of discussion post-film. Like, if you watch the movie and you know what the underlying thing that is driving the film and why both Jeff Bridges' character and Robin Williams' characters meet in the first place, it's really interesting to sort of talk about, the idea of guilt and whether or not, the degree to which you should be held responsible for other people's actions. I thought that they really sort of tackled that idea really well, and that's why the plot is so unique and why I would love to see other directors take on this type of idea.
I really like the film's take on mental illness. Robert Williams' character goes through something that's quite traumatic and ruins his life. And in order to sort of escape the pain of that, he goes into this imaginary world, if that makes sense, or he has these delusions. At first, it's sort of annoying in a way to sort of see his character like have all these delusions and you think, what's going on? But towards the end of the film, you understand why he had to escape into that world. And I really like that. And it gives you a fresh perspective on how people sort of deal with traumatic events, if that makes sense. We were a bit worried that this one wasn't going to show up, and it finally did one Monday afternoon, and that is Diableak. I first heard about Diableak in the murder mystery A Simple Favor, which came out not too long ago, and I really wanted to check it out since then because I heard sort of like the plot lines were a bit similar, like the murder mystery element, and this one surprised me with how good it was. So this film follows the wife of a really cruel principal and his mistress, and they plan to murder him one weekend. And it's really funny seeing the dynamic between the mistress and the wife because they're actually quite good friends and they get along with each other more than they do with the husband, which is pretty funny. And it must be it must be like a cultural thing, or it must be like an era thing, because like I just obviously don't get how you could be friends with your husband's mistress, but anyway.
Yeah.
The film builds tension really well, and it has these long drawn out shots, especially towards the end of the film, where it's sort of building up as this, say like a character's walking through a really dark corridor, and it feels very melodramatic, but it works really well in this case. So the ending, the climax of the film is extremely shocking. It's like one of the biggest twists in cinema history, I feel. And Matt saw it coming a mile away, apparently.
Oh, I was pretty proud of myself. I guessed it pretty accurately, and I never guess the endings of movies correctly before as we're watching them. Like if we're watching a mystery film, obviously you come up with your own theories. I'm like 99% of the time I'm never right, but I actually nailed this one, so I was really proud of myself.
You guessed it shot for shot.
Yeah.
But that didn't stop it from being really effective.
Oh yeah.
And the way it played out, sort of that climax and that slow scene, I think it's set in a bathroom. It was just so shocking, and it was actually quite disturbing. Like I started to get like a bit of adrenaline, when it was happening.
And if you haven't watched it, it's like an amazing thriller mystery, and yeah, just great movie overall. Highly recommended from the both of us. So the next 4 that we're going to be showing, they're actually all movies directed by Wes Anderson. And Wes Anderson's one of those directors where I've known about him for so long, but I've never actually owned his movies. And I've seen quite a few of them, and obviously I've seen all these ones now. But the first one that we're going to be showing is The Royal Tenenbaums. Sorry for the glare, it's a very bright cover. This is actually the first Wes Anderson film that I'd ever watched. And I remember I saw it when I was like 13 or something like that. And I remember liking it quite a lot, but it was an oddball film, which is no surprise given that it is Wes Anderson. So when we got this, I was really excited to rewatch it, and I have to say, I didn't like it as much as I thought I would, as in, I remember liking it a lot more, if that makes sense. But yeah, I still think it was really great. I love the set dressing in this, the sort of... Wes Anderson's also known for having like really symmetrical shots.
Beautiful shots.
Yeah, really beautiful shots. And I just love the oddball characters that he comes up with. Gene Hackman plays his role like excellently in this.
I personally felt that this film was a little bit more style over substance, especially compared to his other films.
Yeah, well, to be fair, that is a common sort of, I don't even want to say criticism. Maybe it's a common talking point among people, when you're discussing Wes Anderson films. A lot of people, I think, probably do feel that way as well. I think on the whole, I think it's definitely a great mix of both. You've got a lot of style, but depending on the movie, there can be a lot of substance in it as well.
We have Bottle Rocket. So this is Wes Anderson's first feature film, I believe. And you can sort of tell because you can tell he hasn't really found his feet yet with his style. But I really love, like I said with Punch Drunk Love, it's a film where not a whole lot happens, but it's more about the characters and how they interact and how they develop.
I do agree with you that like he is still finding his style, but I think there is enough here in its execution that you can still like definitively say that is Wes Anderson.
Oh yeah.
Like obviously understandably throughout his career he refines his style a lot more, but even for his first feature film you can tell he's left his signature on it, I would say.
I think the standout performance from this film is definitely Owen Wilson's performance.
Yeah.
He is he's hilarious in it, but he's also quite complex. Like he goes through a lot of like emotional sort of turning points within the film, and there is this final shot of him, and it sort of feels it's like a very surprisingly emotional shot for the end of like a Wes Anderson film, if that makes sense. Like it's cathartic, even though what's happening isn't necessarily like a joyous occasion.
The next one from Wes Anderson, this is Rushmore. Another really bright case that is not going to come up well on camera. Finally watched it, and funnily enough, it was always one of those plots where it never really super interested me. Like just like you reading the plot description on IMDb, and I'm like,
yeah.
I always put it at the back of my mind, which is really silly in retrospect because I think this is probably the favorite one out of the ones that we have here to show today because this was such a nice, pleasant surprise. The really cool thing with Max Fisher, who's played by Jason Schwartzman, is he's such a quirky, oddball character that initially is very hard to relate to, but as you sort of go through the plot and you see the way they deal with his emotional complexity, and at the end of the day you realize that he is just like a regular teenager despite all his quirks.
Quirkiness.
Yeah, exactly. Like I thought it was really compelling in that way, so you can actually relate to him in a lot of ways. It just takes a little while to get to that point.
I like that.
Yeah, and I think Bill Murray is a really I loved his performance in this as well. Just played it excellently. And yeah, just a really, really great film in his filmography. I'm looking forward to watching other films, like revisiting ones like The Grand Budapest Hotel. At the moment, I think this might be my favorite one. But again, I think Grand Budapest I enjoyed a little bit more, but it's been some time. But this one really surprised me with how good it actually was. If you're new to Wes Anderson films and you haven't watched this one, I definitely highly recommend it because I feel like it's got a great mix of having a really interesting plot that slowly evolves over the course of the film, and also is a really good example of Wes Anderson effectively communicating his personal signature and style to the screen. I think he really captured that really effectively.
And finally, we have the Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. This is probably my favourite Wes Anderson film that I've seen so far, because it has the style of the Royal Tenenbaums, but it has the heart of Bottle Rocket. So it's like, it feels like to me, you've got the budget, you've got the storyline, you've got the heart, and it's probably his perfect film, and that is a big call.
It is a big call, and I disagree, but fair enough.
But I really love like the character interactions with this. This is like the first of his films where I actually felt myself emotionally attached to the characters. So the film follows Bill Murray's character, who is an oceanographer and like a famous filmmaker, and he is hunting down a rare breed of shark that took the life of his friend and fellow crew member. So he assembles his oddball crew, and on the crew is someone who may or may not be his son, played by Owen Wilson. And I really love the relationship dynamic between the two, and I think that really drives the heart of the film. It really made me feel for the characters. I think the biggest win over for this film for me was the set. The set was absolutely beautiful. Though I don't know how the hell they created it, but it's set on a huge ocean liner, and it sort of pans across rooms, and it must have been so expensive to make, but it was just absolutely beautiful. And it used stop motion animation to portray creatures in the sea, and I thought it would be tacky, but it actually worked really well. Like it looked pretty cool.
It's pretty
like
cute,
it was very quirky, yeah. But overall, this is definitely my personal favourite of Wes Anderson that I've seen so far, even more than Grand Budapest.
Oh, wow.
And I highly recommend it. It's so much fun, and it has a lot of heart.
So that brings us to the end of the video. Thank you very much for watching. We hope you enjoyed it. Our next video is probably going to be a Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray haul, but not long after that we probably will be showing off the other Criterions we got during the Barnes & Noble sale. So yeah, look forward to that.
Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.